So when Brian was talking, there were some questions around cloud and what sort of prescriptive guidance is out there for folks that are trying to capitalize on the opportunities that cloud provides. OWASP really doesn't have a guide for cloud security yet, and I'm not sure we're ever going to go there. And one of the reasons for that is that we have formed a partnership in the past 12 or 18 months with a new organization called the Cloud Security Alliance that was founded by some folks that are friends of OWASP, and their mission is basically to make cloud security issues visible and to resolve those issues. So they're a nonprofit like ourselves, and they've been doing some really excellent unconferences, if you will, all around the world that they call Cloud Camp. And if you haven't seen a Cloud Camp yet, there was one in Denver just last week that was co-located with the GLUE conference. And these guys are a really sharp, switched-on bunch of people. As I mentioned, they have a working group called Cloud Audit that is in the process of creating an API through which you as a customer will be able to basically, in real time, audit the security of the cloud service providers that you're hosting your software and applications with. So it's now my great pleasure to introduce to you Randy Barr with the Cloud Security Alliance, who is also the Chief Security Officer for Qualys. So please give it up for Randy.
Well, good morning, everybody. Jim Rivas, the Executive Director of Cloud Security Alliance, couldn't be here today to give the presentation. So he asked me to go ahead and give the presentation on his behalf. Beautiful part about giving this presentation is I received it just recently, so I was going through it and trying to figure out ways to reduce the slides down to 20 minutes. So there's a lot of information related to Cloud Security Alliance that we want to share with you. So some of that information is available on the Cloud Security Alliance website. We encourage you to go out there and visit it. So as far as my goal today is I'm supposed to represent Cloud Security Alliance and cover the cloud security, the road ahead. But out of curiosity, a show of hands, how many people are familiar with the Cloud Security Alliance, either participated, downloaded the doc, or just heard it through other people? Okay, few hands. So for those of you that are not familiar with Cloud Security Alliance, it was actually started out as a grassroots effort about a year and a half ago. A few people in the industry got together and said, look, cloud is coming down the road and there's not a lot of guidance out there. How do we evaluate cloud for our environment and make sure we feel comfortable in using that service? So quite a few people contributed a number of different things to the Cloud Security Alliance to where it's at today. Today we have about 9,000 individual members, about 50 corporate members. Now the individual members are free. We're not charging any individual members to participate. We are asking for them to contribute some of their free time to some of the working groups that we have going on. Corporate and affiliate members also have an ability to give into the Cloud Security Alliance, and a lot of that information is available online for those of you that are interested in learning more about that. Now, the goal is to essentially build best practices on trusted cloud ecosystem and really to promote best practices for providing security assurance within the cloud computing. Now, one of the questions I was asked earlier, I think I heard someone ask this question, is what is cloud computing? And if we look back in the days of where computing resources really came from, starting from the mainframe days, we moved away from that and started headed towards client-server environment, and then eventually to the cloud computing or on-demand model for allocation and consumption of computer resources. Now, there's a lot of benefits in moving in that direction. I've seen articles out there, I've seen some surveys where some of the questions asked, what are some of the reasons why cloud users are not adopting cloud providers? And some of them cited security as the main reason. And if you dive deeper into that specific area, it's really not security itself. It's more compliance or not being able to connect their internal services out to the cloud for a hybrid model. The other part about it is mostly due to cost savings. A lot of companies view moving towards the cloud as a way to reduce costs in their environment. Now, some companies have made mistakes. Companies went to other providers that state that they're a cloud provider. In fact, they really aren't. And in some cases, some of these cloud users lost a lot of money. The reason why I brought that up is because understanding what cloud computing is very important to be able to hold a conversation with some of these providers and then also determine whether or not they really are, in fact, a provider. Some of the other pros also include hyperconnectivity. Back in the dot-com days where everybody was growing infrastructures, pulling in lines, those lines are still there today. A lot of software as a service company are going to be able to take advantage of that. And then, of course, service-oriented architecture and scale. Major providers create massive IT capabilities. So if we look at the definition of cloud, there is a definition out there. NIST came out with a good definition, and it's adopted by many people out there today. Just about every presentation I see today on cloud computing leverages NIST definition. And what NIST says is that if you're a cloud provider, you have to have these characteristics. One of them is on-demand provisioning. You have to be able to go online, set up your services within a matter of minutes or hours. But if it takes you longer to set up a service online, longer than it would take your IT department to put it together, there's a very good chance that that company is not a cloud provider. Another area or characteristic of the cloud computing is elasticity. You should be able to scale up and also scale down very quickly in order to leverage those services. Multi-tenancy is another characteristic, and in some cases a concern for some security professionals, where your data may reside on the same server, the same virtualized environment, or the same database with other customers, and potentially even your own competitors. There are some key types of cloud. There's the infrastructure as a service, which is usually identified as your operating system and your storage. Then there's platform as a service, where you can develop on top of this environment, and this actually sits on top of infrastructure as a service. And then more the common type of cloud, which is software as a service. I've actually worked for a software as a service company in the last 3 companies I've worked for in building a security program. And there's a lot of requirements that are put in place by the customers. And I'll touch on that a little bit more. There's also different ways to deploy the different clouds, whether it's public, private, community, and hybrid cloud deployments. So let's look at the SPI framework. SPI stands for Software, Platform, and Infrastructure as a Service framework, and how it relates to security. A lot of folks agree that when you're leveraging infrastructure as a service, and if you look at infrastructure as a service, you have all the layers from the facilities to the hardware and a few other layers in there. Adding on top of that your work, or the work that you need to put on top of that, you have to embed security in it. And if you look at this presentation as a scaling model all the way up to software as a service, the software as a service vendor would have to have the responsibility in managing security for that cloud provider. Now, there's still some responsibility between both parties, whether it's the user or the provider. But in most cases, when it comes to software as a service, a lot of the requirements are actually made in RFPs or SLAs. Some customers may go in and want to perform their own audits, may have a third party to perform a pen test against their environment. But what I've seen in the past is that a lot of these cloud users only do it once, and sometimes at the beginning of these assessments, and never follow up a year after or semi-annual requirements. So there are some key cloud security problems, and Cloud Security Alliance actually created this research on top threats. The first top threat is trust. A lot of the cloud providers or cloud users go into this with no trust about the cloud provider. And it makes it even harder if the cloud provider is not transparent about their security program. You know, what type of mitigation strategies that they put in place? Do they actually perform their own assessment against their environment to make sure that security controls are properly implemented? There's also the concern of impacts to governance for the cloud users, as well as risk management and, of course, compliance. Users have a lot of compliance requirements, whether it's PCI, local privacy requirements, HIPAA, FDA, maybe even DoD requirements. Some of that has to be able to play into the service provider if